We are going to start chapter 13 and 14 dealing with social influences and social psychology. This is a pretty cool chapter, lots of interesting things in here. The definition of social psychology is the individual in relation to society and emphasizes how we think about, shape, and connect with each other. And so this is basically how do you deal with yourself, how do you deal with other people, and how do you deal with society itself. So the social cognition term there, this is how people gather, use, and react to information about the behavior of others and the world around them. So basically it's done on the first impression. So kind of, when you first go to a restaurant and you look at it, that's your social cognition. You're like, oh, okay, this is what I'm expecting, this is what I see. And so it's kind of how you gather information, you react to information, maybe your first day at school, and you kind of see how people are acting. If you're a new kid at the school, you're trying to figure out what is the protocol for this class. And what you're using is what we call social cognition. You're understanding what's going on in the social setting, you're cognitively thinking about it. And again, you're trying to figure out your behavior based on that. The self-fulfilling prophecy, this happens when our beliefs about another person or ourselves lead us to act in a way that brings about behaviors we expect. A lot of times it confirms our original impression. Self-fulfilling prophecy a lot of times does deal with us, but it can deal with other people or what you think people are going to act like. If you think a teacher is going to be mean, then they're probably going to meet that expectation of that. If you think you're going to do really, really well on a test, and you a lot of times will act in a way that confirms that original impression. So therefore you think you're going to do bad on a test, you go into a test, you take it, and you already are going to do bad because you've talked yourself into it. Almost think of it like that. Number 4, there's a weird book called Pygmalion in the Classroom. It was written in the 60s. And this book helps show the expectations of teachers did affect student achievement. Teachers were told a certain group of kids were ripe for intellectual growth, when in fact they were randomly selected. In the end, the kids who were supposedly ripe for intellectual growth did in fact demonstrate significant growth compared to others. Why? Well, because teachers tended to help those kids more. They gave them more feedback, they increased opportunities for work, and then the kids bought into the fact that they were more talented and capable. Kind of a weird setting, but almost think of it like this. If you were a teacher and you were an employer, let's say you owned a business, and you had 2 people coming in, and one of those individuals coming in to work for you, they came highly recommended from other people. Maybe you would push them a little bit more because their expectations are higher for them. And the other person that got hired in, you didn't really know much about, so you didn't really pour too much of yourself into them. That's kind of the idea here. And this can work negatively. If you think you can't do something at the first sign of trouble or difficulty, you just might quit. Because why? You don't want to deal with the hassle of it, and you don't want to be wrong, you don't want to prove other people wrong, and you don't want to fulfill that prophecy of you failing, so you might just quit. And that could be part of that. Social comparison, this is a way to evaluate self-esteem, is to make comparisons between others and yourself. When you're talking about comparison, you have to understand that you have a self-concept or a self-schema. This is a belief that you have about yourself. That could be the fact that you believe you are smart, that believes that you are athletic, or you are attractive, or you are good at math, or you are good at art. That's what we mean by a self-concept or self-schema. Self-esteem refers to a value judgment a person makes about how worthy a person is on comparisons with how they were in the past, as well as how they measure up to others. So this is like, do you have confidence in speaking in front of people? That might mean require a high self-esteem. Do you, when you're looking at your life compared to other people, how do you measure up? Are you not as good of an athlete as this person? Are you not as good in psychology as this person? And that does deal with your self-esteem. The problem is again, it's just simply this. It's a value judgment a person makes about how worthy a person is, but it's based on comparisons with others. And so that's the problem with self-esteem. Sometimes people have low self-esteem because they're looking at Instagram all the time and seeing the fun lives that everybody lives, and so therefore you struggle with your self-esteem because you don't feel like you're having that much fun. And so that's why self-esteem can be a dangerous thing, but it does deal with confidence. Temporal comparison, this is comparing our current abilities with our abilities in the past. I remember when I kind of started to understand this concept. When I was in high school, I wasn't a very good basketball player at all. I guess I'm probably not very good anymore either. But I really liked to play soccer, but I wasn't very good at it. And as I got older and I went to college and I learned more about the game, I realized that my current ability of playing soccer in my 20s, I was just a much better soccer player because I was a better athlete. I could understand the game better, understand the concepts, versus what I was in high school. So that's what we call temporal comparison, your current abilities with your abilities in the past. My confidence level speaking in front of people is higher now than it was 15, 20 years ago. That's temporal comparison. Reference groups, comparing ourselves to individuals we perceive to be similar to us or to people who are members of groups we belong. So what we're saying is you are comparing yourself to your friends in your class. And what we would say, your mom's like, well, how did you do on the test? And you're like, well, I did pretty well on the test. And then you're like, but Johnny did worse than I did. So it's a reference group. And again, you're comparing yourselves to individuals that you deal are similar to us. So if you're thinking about, being on a soccer team and you're like, well, I didn't get as much playing time as this kid. Well, if that kid's the best kid on the team, then you might not be able to compare that to him because you're not part of that reference group. But let's say on a basketball team, you're the 11th best kid and there's a 12th best kid, then perhaps what you would want to do is compare yourself to that. Next, relative deprivation. This is when we compare ourselves with our reference group and find out that regardless of how much we receive, it is less than what others similar to us have. So basically what you're saying is once you compare yourself to that worst kid, you realize that, you know what, it doesn't matter how much I'm getting assistance, I'm not getting it as much as this other kid. This kid's getting more playing time, and it's unfortunate. That's why we're saying it's relative deprivation. You're being deprived of something. So when you compare yourself, so again, let's go back to that illustration. You are the 11th best kid. There's a 12th best kid on the team for basketball. And when you compare what's going on with your playing time and how much the coach is investing in you, you look at it and say, regardless of how much I receive, it is less than what others similar to us have. And so, therefore, you believe yourself that you are being given less opportunity than this other kid. False consensus effect, overestimating how much others share our opinion or behave in the same way we do. So this is the comparison I give with this is I do not like Olive Garden at all. I think it's overrated, and I know we've had this discussion in class before. And so when I say I hate Olive Garden, then I believe in my heart that other people also hate Olive Garden, which is just simply not true. So what I'm doing is I'm overestimating how much others share my opinion. And so when I ask people, hey, what is the most overrated restaurant? I believe everyone should say Olive Garden. And that's the false consensus effect because there's not a general consensus on that. Attitudes. Well, let me go back here as far as review some of this stuff right quick. Some of the stuff I would highlight: self-fulfilling prophecy, Pygmalion in the classroom, reference groups, and false consensus effect. Attitudes. This is a learned predisposition to respond in a favorable or unfavorable way to event. It's your attitude towards something. This is why some people say, if you change your attitude or you change your outlook, then that will kind of change the way that the event is perceived. Again, your outlook, your attitude does have a huge, huge bearing on how things are done in your life. You could go into a party and think this is going to be the worst party ever, and it's going to turn out that way because you believe that. It is a learned predisposition. And so if you go into something thinking this is going to be the greatest thing of all time, then it might turn out that way. The example I always tend to think with this is leadership camp. A lot of times in leadership camp, the kids are like, this is going to be dumb. I can't believe we're going on this. And then it turns out that they actually don't like it. But if you go in there with a good attitude, thinking I'm going to miss school and I'm going to hang out with my friends, then it actually turns out to be a pretty fun event. Every attitude consists of a cognition, which is a belief, an affect, a feeling, and a behavior, which is an action. Every attitude does these three things. The mere exposure effect, this is when your attitude changes after being around a situation or individuals. And so therefore, think of it like this. The more you are around people, the more you tend to actually like them. So the more you start, let's say you didn't really love basketball when you first started playing, but in theory, according to the mere exposure effect, the more you're around the situation, the more you really might like it, time and time and time and time and time again. This is why maybe perhaps the first time you interact with somebody, you might not like them, but the more and more you're around them, you're like, they're not so bad. All right, we're going to try to go through cognitive dissonance, and then we'll be done for this lesson. Cognitive dissonance is when we experience an unpleasant state because we are holding conflicting beliefs or have an inconsistency between our beliefs and behavior. You either have to change your behavior or you have to reduce your belief or add a new thought. Now, think of it like this. I would highlight the words unpleasant state and then highlight conflicting beliefs. So I gave you two examples here. I really love drinking pop. I love Coke, I love Verner's, and I love Dr. Pepper. But I know that it's packed with sugar and it's not very good for me. And so when I drink it, inside, I don't feel like I should be doing that. But yet I continue to drink it, knowing that it's not healthy for me, but I like the taste. There's a cognitive dissonance there. The two they just fight against each other. Some people would say smoking could be under that. People that smoke. Oh, I smoke and I know I shouldn't, but I do anyway. And that's cognitive dissonance. And when you have these things, you either have to change your behavior. So, for example, for the drinking pop, I would have to change my behavior. Either I have to decide to not drink pop, or I can reduce my belief. Well, at least I don't drink hard whiskey. Pop is not as bad as hard whiskey is on me. Or I can add a new thought, basically saying, well, even though I drink pop, I do drink a decent amount of water. So therefore, I'm kind of justifying what I'm doing. So for smokers, it would be like, well, I just need to stop smoking. That would be the change in behavior. Or I have to reduce my belief, such as, well, smoking isn't that bad for you. I don't smoke like a chimney. I just smoke one cigarette a day. Or add a new thought of, well, you know what, at least I exercise, and as a result of me exercising, that allows me to smoke a little bit more. We're going to stop there, and I'll talk about Leo Festinger and talk about his study. Again, if you have any questions, hopefully this helps as we go through these and get ready to go on chapter 13.